A week of a sermon series titled Be Happy. And I want to start today the way that we started in the series by asking this question: what makes you happy? And we answered it in the first week by saying that no thing makes you happy, because as you know, and as I know, there's no thing that's going to make you happy, because your happiness is more about a who than a what. It's more about people than possessions, about relationships than riches. And so no thing will make you happy. And the second week, we started looking at some tremendous teachings from Jesus that are called the Beatitudes. It's in Matthew chapter, anybody know? Yeah, say it out loud again. 5, right? And I want you to know where to find these teachings, because they are awesome, remarkable. And for this to really work for you, meaning your own spiritual growth, you got to read it for yourself at some point in time. I hope to just inspire you to go to the Word. But in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus starts off with these Beatitudes. Blessed are, or another appropriate translation is, happy are. And he lays out these 8 principles of happiness. And if you missed that, it's online. You can watch it through our website. But there's a common denominator of these 8 principles of happiness, and that is that happiness is ultimately an outcome, that we can sow our way to happiness. What makes you happy? No thing. And then sowing, meaning sowing and reaping. That we can make choices today that will lead us in the direction of happiness tomorrow. Now, all of us kind of wish it was different. We wish that we could just get happiness today. In fact, there's a lot of marketers and advertisers, and I love marketing and advertising, but they do tell us that if you just buy this thing or go to this place, that you can kind of consume your way to happiness, that happiness is immediately available. But we know that that's not true. You can get pleasure, and we talked about that last week. But real happiness is about sowing your way towards happiness, just like you would sow seeds. And the truth is, the opposite is also true, unfortunately, that you can sow in the direction of unhappiness. And last week we talked a little bit about those friends, those family members that we know, probably our own experience as well, when we have sown in the direction not of our happiness, but of our regret, of our guilt. And so we don't want to do that. So there's one more idea that we need to talk about today, and it starts off this way. As long as you are all about you, you won't be happy. As long as you are all about you, you won't be happy, which, like up here, we all agree, don't we? But if we're really honest, that in here, somewhere in us, is something that fights against this idea, because somewhere along the line, all of us developed a degree of selfishness. And you look, it starts really early. Every baby I've ever met is selfish, right? They don't ever ask their parents, what can I do for you today, Dad? Instead, it's feed me, change me, love me. And, they're a baby, right? But hopefully we grow out of it, because if we don't, we'll never be happy. Or to put it another way, you can't fulfill you. You really can't. I wish we could. Because that means then we would have more control over our happiness than we really do. But those of us who've just focused all of our attention on ourselves, we find out that we're never filled up. Or to put it another way, you can't acquire, consume, or exercise your way to happiness. And let me tell you how this works out in my life. I got this neighbor that lives right next to me. His name's Bill Williams. We call him Bill, which we think that's funny for some reason. And so Bill, he works for CarMax. And he's at the level of employment where he's allowed to take any car he wants home off the lot. And so he shows up every week with a different awesome car, tricked out trucks and muscle cars and Mercedes-Benz. And his driveway is right next to our bedroom window. And so some mornings, I wake up to the sound of the muscle car turning on. It's I'm like, oh, Bill's up, And I think, I can't help but, sometimes I just think, if I was getting into that Mustang rather than my Prius, I might be happier, Or I have this other friend who seems to always be going on vacations with his wife. And they're leaving the kids behind, and they're just going to sandy, warm places. And I think if I could just go on vacations like this person does and have those experiences, consume those things, then I would be happier. Or this other neighbor of mine that I just found out, and by looking at him, I would have never guessed it. I don't, but he did a triathlon. And I'm like, what? And I know what it means to be healthier and how that makes you feel better. I really believe in exercise. But there is this part of me that thinks that if I could just exercise like that, if I could be that healthy, that fit, that I would be happier. But notice, while I want Bill's cars and I want that guy's vacations and that guy's, exercise and his fitness, I don't want any of their lives completely, right? Because each of them have their own issues. But what I want to do is I want to take from their highlight reels of their life and I want to put together what I call a composite person, which is not a real person, but it's the highlight reel of like the best things that they have going on. And you've probably done this too. You've like looked and you're like, well, if I had what she's wearing, or if I had his job, or, if I just, had that sense of humor, or if I was that way with people, and you pick and choose from the people around you and you develop this composite person and you begin to compare yourself to that person as if you could ever be that way, you would be happy. But the problem with the composite person is it's not a real person. Rather, it's like Frankenstein. It's a monster. It ends up being a monster. And when we pursue this composite person, trying to acquire, consume, and exercise our way to happiness, we never get there. It's not possible. But what is possible is that you can serve and volunteer your way there. You can serve and volunteer your way to happiness. Now, this is not like a theological idea, although there is theological backing to it. Go home tonight and Google the connection between service or volunteering and happiness and health. Go home and do that search, and what you'll find is study after study that makes a correlation or a connection between people who volunteer. And I'm not talking like that, once a year my family goes and volunteers on Thanksgiving. That's great if you do that, keep doing that. But I'm talking about people who make a lifestyle of volunteering and serving. They carve out time every week or every month, and they're consistent in volunteering and serving. One study I looked at was from the University of Chicago and asked the question, what were the most satisfying jobs? And here they are. Jobs that involve caring for others, teaching others, protecting others, and then creative pursuits. I just kind of want to throw the fourth one on there. But caring for others, teaching others, protecting others, firefighters, teachers, nurses, those sorts of professions tend to be the most satisfying jobs. Another study, which was actually like a collection of studies, they did a survey in the UK of various studies about volunteering and health and happiness. It came up with these conclusions. It says those who are regularly volunteering, they see a decrease in depression, heart disease, stress, and then particularly among youth, young people, a decrease in drug use and unplanned pregnancies. Now, what's cool about this is that when it comes to the youth and the young people, even when they are forced to volunteer, even when their arm is twisted to volunteer and they volunteer with a bad attitude, there's still good outcomes. Isn't that something? Some more of the outcomes were there was an increase in psychological well-being, physical health, self-esteem, longevity. For one of the studies said it's as if you just take years off your life by volunteering and serving, and quality of life. It increases the quality of your life. I bet you in a group this size, there's at least somebody in here that could talk about a time in their life when things weren't going well. Maybe it was work-related or relationship-related, and they couldn't fix it. But they got involved in something meaningful. And that increased their quality of life. And as the quality of life increased in this one area, it tends to help out the other areas. So this is the science. But it leads to this question, how can behaving selflessly make myself happier? Or to put it another way, how can emptying myself leave me feeling full? Right? Because again, there's something in you and there's something in me, if we were to be honest, and we should be, this is church, 1 hour a week, that we should be honest, at least. And we know that when I think about what's going to make me happy, there's at least part of me that's pulling in the direction of I want to spend my time and my resources and everything on me. But the research, and that's the science, is saying that if I empty myself, somehow I'll be left feeling full. There's this amazing story about Jesus. He's tired, he's hungry, and so he sits down at this well, middle of the day, and he sends his disciples off to go get some food. He's too tired to go. And then this woman shows up which is odd because it's middle of the day and she's got a lot of needs. She's got relational issues. She's got shame issues. She's not connected in the community. And Jesus ministers to her. And then the disciples come back and they're like, Jesus, we got some food. And he's like, I'm not hungry anymore. And then they kind of say amongst themselves, like, does he have a stash of food that we're not aware of? Like Jesus has been squirreling away like granola bars or something like that. And Jesus, being Jesus, he understands and he says, no. Doing the will of my Father, doing ministry, giving my life away, that is my food. And some of you could probably tell a story about times where like you didn't really feel like it, but you went anyways and you volunteered and you gave of yourself and you came back filled up. And it made a difference. And so how does this work? It's 2 words. Divine design. This is the theology now. Right? We looked at the science, but now this is the theology. The theology is saying that God created you in such a way that you're designed to give your life away. And that when you give your life away, you get it back in abundance. You were designed for this. So the Apostle Paul, writing, he talks about this dynamic, and he talks about this fact that we're designed in a certain sort of way. And he starts off, and we're dropping in the middle of one of his letters to this church in Galatia. And he says, the acts of the flesh. And if you grew up in church, you understand that when Paul says acts of the flesh, he's talking about our sinful nature. The part of us that is like the thief that comes to kill, steal, and destroy, kill opportunities and steal away joy and destroy relationships, that sinful nature that all of us struggle with. He says the acts of the flesh, the sinful nature are obvious. Like we don't even need to list them, but here we go. There's sexual immorality, just being loose with one's sexuality in a way that can harm people. Impurity, debauchery, which is just like overdoing it. Idolatry. When we look to something else to make us happy, to fulfill us, that's idolatry other than our loving Father in heaven. Witchcraft, that's like trying to manipulate the things around you, trying to buy your way into heaven, trying to buy your way into goodness. Hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissension, and factions, right? Factions, this is what we're talking about in terms of issues like guns and other things and our whole political scene. I'm in this group and you're in that group and we won't ever talk to each other because we each got our faction and our faction's more important than peace and getting along. Envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. And then he says the fruit of the Spirit, and notice the contrast here. We got fruit of the Spirit and acts of the flesh. And he's saying there's these 2 ways to be in the world, and there's like 2 outcomes that come from your orientation. There's the fruit of the Spirit, and there's the acts of the flesh. And the fruit of the Spirit, they are love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And then Paul makes a statement that will be one of the most powerful statements that you will ever hear. And he says, against such things there is no law. Go ahead and show the next slide. What he's saying is that when it comes to loving, joyful, peaceful, patient, kind, good, faithful, gentle, and self-controlled behavior, there is no law against these. That when you're behaving this way, there's really very little need for rules. That if your relationship was categorized or characterized by kindness and goodness, by joyful and peace, then it would get along pretty well and there wouldn't need to be a whole lot of rules. That if our church or our community, if when people described it, they said, it's a loving, joyful, peaceful, patient, kind, good, faithful, gentle, self-controlled community, we wouldn't need a whole lot of rules and regulation. In fact, like our police officers, like their jobs would be really boring. It'd basically be just like directing traffic, except for that would be hard now because all of us would be looking out for each other saying, no, you first, and the police officer would have to convince somebody to go first. Some of you got that. But think about that. Think about your workplace. Think about your relationships. And Paul's saying that if we were to have these fruits of the Spirit, if we began to manifest these things, then we wouldn't need a whole lot of rules, a whole lot of laws, a whole lot of restrictions, because we would be putting each other first. We would be living the selfless life. that we're called to live, that we're designed to live. Some further evidence. How do we measure the value of a life? You ever asked that question? How would we measure the value of your life? Let me show you how you wouldn't do it. Imagine that we're at somebody's funeral. We wouldn't say this at their eulogy. Like, oh, my friend Al, he was the most immoral, impure man you ever would have met. He was indulgent all the time and downright hateful. And boy, you didn't want to bring anything nice around him because he was so jealous and angry. And the guy could argue. And if he wasn't asleep, he was drunk. Right? We would not say that at somebody's funeral because this is not how we measure the value of a life, is it? And not a person in here would want any of these things to be said at their funeral. Because that's not how we value life, is it? The value of a life is always measured by how much of it is given away. That's what you hear at funerals. That's what you hear about people when somebody's saying, oh, you should meet my friend, or I wish you would have met my dad, which I've talked about many times, and it's how they give their life away. They're generous with their resources, they're generous with their time, they're generous with their spirit. They invest in other people. And the really, really great people are the ones that give it away. Yesterday, I was at the unveiling of the Peyton Manning statue. My brother-in-law did the statue, Ryan Feeney, love him. So we were there to celebrate Ryan, but, and I like Peyton Manning. I'm a Bears fan, but I like Peyton Manning. I like the Colts. And he gets up there, or the people get up beforehand, and, they're talking about what a great football player he was, but the real theme was how much of his life he gave away to the community. That's why he gets a statue. It's the greatness of a man or a woman is based on this. One more idea. This is the Dead Sea in Israel, and the Dead Sea is dead. Some of you might know because water comes in and nothing goes out. And I've been to the Dead Sea. It's pretty remarkable. The salt content of the Dead Sea is so robust that you can actually sit back and float in it, like you're in a pool lounge chair. Thank you. Yeah, like in a lounge chair, which is neat and it's fun to get into. But you're warned before you step into the Dead Sea. Anybody know why? Because if you get a little bit of that water on your lips, in a cut, or God forbid, in your eyes, it will burn so badly, you'll barely be able to stand it. And just about 80 miles north of the Dead Sea is the Sea of Galilee, which I've been to as well. Around the Sea of Galilee, there's restaurants, and there's a fishing industry, and there's people out boating and having a good time, water skiing, and it's full of life. But at the Dead Sea, because water comes in and nothing goes out, is dead. And like the Dead Sea, taken in but never giving out will leave you empty. Because God is pouring into you. He's pouring in opportunity. He's giving you a measure of time, a measure of talent, a measure of opportunity, people around you to love on, to give to. And so you're being poured into like the Dead Sea is being poured into, but if you never pour out, if you're not involved in some sort of service or volunteer opportunity, and it could be in a formal way, it could be here at a church, it could be with an organization, or you could just have a lifestyle of volunteering, helping out neighbors, saying yes. What do you need? Yes. I don't even know what you need. Yes, I'll do that for you. I'm just going to dedicate part of my time each week, each month, to just giving it away. Otherwise, if you don't, then you'll be like the Dead Sea. And I like to have a practical application, meaning when I'm done preaching, I hope that you know what to do when I'm done, like what to take away. And so here's the practical application. Don't be the Dead Sea. Just don't. It won't be good for you. You won't be happy. And the happiest people you know, if you drill down into their lives, and oftentimes you don't even need to drill down very far, it's just so apparent that they're giving their lives away. And it's the secret to their happiness. And that's available to you. It's available to me. So to sum it all up, you were designed by the giver of life to give your life away. That's how you were designed. And that's a theological idea. But there is scientific evidence that supports it. But I'll just ask you, those times that you've been selfish in life, those times when you spent it all on you, did that work out well? Those times that you gave your life away, when you served others, even when you didn't feel like it, even when you had a bad attitude. Teenagers aren't the only ones with bad attitudes. Aren't you glad you did? It's because you were designed this way. Let us pray. God, I'm so grateful that you sent your son, that you gave him, and that he lived a life of servant leadership. That time and time again, even when he didn't feel like it, even when he needed rest, he served. And that filled him up. And ultimately, Lord, he gave it all. And we call him great. And so, God, I pray for each person here that they might discern the way and manner in which they can serve. And protect us, Lord, from overdoing it, from overfunctioning, from giving more than we really can give, and therefore becoming bitter about it. But God, help us to get into that place that you called us to, where we give of ourselves in a healthy way. Because that's what you created us for. And for those that are here that haven't taken that step, or it's been a long time since they've taken that step, give them an extra ounce of courage. Help them to be inspired. For Lord, your vision is clear. You've created us for a life that is just abundant. And we thank you for that. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, amen.